I knew this morning was headed south the moment I stepped into Harold Benton's office. He was leaning back like some bargain bin movie villain twirling a plastic pen blind's half-closed fluorescent light buzzing above. At 59, I'd seen my fair share of smug grins, but his half-smile was practically begging for someone to wipe it away. He didn't offer me a seat, just a chin jerk like I'd been summoned for judgment. In that condescending tone he'd perfected since joining the company last winter, Harold said, "I need you to erase your files. They belong to the company now." For a moment I thought I'd misheard him. Erase my files. This wasn't some messy desktop with family photos. This was 14 years of payroll architecture, encrypted keys, compliance schedules, audit trails, everything that kept the paychecks moving for over 1,500 employees. I asked slowly, "You want me to delete the payroll system files?" He scoffed. "They're not payroll system files, just old clutter. We're moving to a shared approach so no single person controls things. You've been holding too much too close to the chest." And there it was, the jab meant to paint me as territorial and outdated. If you've ever had a new manager stomp in flexing authority, without understanding the work, you know exactly the type. If you're hearing this and haven't subscribed yet, maybe tap that subscribe button. It keeps us fueled to share the stories that make your coffee taste better. Back in his office, I kept my face neutral. At my age, you learn the calmest woman in the room usually wins. He couldn't know that in that single nod he'd signed the death warrant for his career. The file wasn't just a file, it was the file, the encrypted master key for the entire payroll system. Without it, no direct deposits, no checks, no payouts. By compliance law, there was no restore button, no cloud backup. That key lived only on a secure local drive regenerated once every few years, and I was the only authorized administrator. I thought of every time Harold ignored my system warnings, brushed off my maintenance schedules, or took credit in meetings for processes I'd spent months perfecting. And then I smiled, the kind of smile men mistake for agreement. "All right," I said. This wasn't just arrogance, it was reckless ignorance dressed in a cheap suit. And now Harold wanted to bulldoze my work not because it was broken, but because it bruised his ego that something vital didn't have his fingerprints on it. I gave him a smile that to him probably looked like agreement. "All right," I said, and walked out without another word. The trip back to my desk felt like slow motion. Each step carried the weight of a decision I'd already made, but the clarity was cold and steady. The little blinking cursor appeared, asking me to confirm deletion. My finger hovered, not in doubt, but to savor the moment. One last breath, one final keystroke, and the master file was gone. Just like that, 14 years of intricate payroll architecture vanished in seconds. I logged the action in the audit trail exactly as it happened. File deleted per manager instruction. No adjectives, no drama, just a fact that would later hang in the air like a noose. Across the floor, I heard Harold laughing with another manager about finally cleaning up old clutter before heading to grab his mid-morning coffee. I leaned back in my chair, closed my laptop, and let the quiet hum of the Boston office wrap around me. The first domino had fallen. I didn't linger in guilt. There was no movie-like pause, no moral crisis. I'd been storing up mental IOUs for years, every insult, every stolen credit waiting for the right day to cash them in. He had just handed me the lumber to build something sharp. I remembered his first week on the job back in February. He couldn't tell a secure access protocol from a lunch order, but within days he was bragging to the department about streamlining payroll with changes that were literally my work just renamed. A month later, he called my documentation paranoid redundancy in front of the CFO, the same documentation that had saved us during a banking outage. And just last quarter, he excluded me from the benefits vendor meeting, only to email me later for help setting up the secure data exchange. Those weren't minor slights, they were neon warnings. Harold didn't respect the systems, the people, or the stakes. So when he told me to erase the one thing keeping 1,500 paychecks moving like clockwork, I kept my face neutral. His lazy nod was all I needed. That was the moment, the quiet click of a trap snapping shut. I wasn't just following an order. I was engraving Harold Benton's name right onto it. There's a shift that happens when you stop defending yourself and realize you're the one holding the blade. It's not adrenaline. It's colder, steadier. I could already see the sequence of events, each step falling like a row of dominoes, and I knew I wouldn't stop it. I thought of the audit logs, the compliance protocols, the legal safeguards. Our payroll system wasn't a Word document you could fish out of the recycle bin. That master key existed on one secure local drive for a reason: to comply with federal and Massachusetts payroll regulations. No cloud backup, no shadow copy. It could only be regenerated with my written authorization after a multi-step verification process that took weeks. That was by design, my design, and Harold wanted it gone. If you've been nodding along, waiting to see what happens when the tables turn completely, make sure you hit that subscribe button now, because the next chapter is where the real fallout begins. I rested my hand on the edge of his desk, gave the smallest nod. All right, I said, like I'd just agreed to toss a stack of outdated memos. Then I walked out without waiting for further instructions. There weren't any to give. On the way back to my desk, I passed coworkers offering polite, tight smiles, the kind you give when you don't want to be caught in a manager's blast radius. They had no idea they'd be feeling the aftershocks by morning. At my chair, I opened the secure console, fingers hovering over the keyboard, not in hesitation, but in appreciation. This wasn't just deletion. It was the pivot point in a long game. People had called my security measures over-engineered. That's what they say when they can't imagine consequences beyond next Friday's happy hour. Payroll isn't about happy hours. It's about mortgages, car payments, and keeping the lights on for 1,500 families. I'd tested and retested every safeguard until the system was tight as a drum. The master key was the heartbeat. One glance toward Harold's empty office chair spun halfway around, and I made it official. The cursor blinked like it knew. One keystroke and the countdown began. The order was his, the fallout would be his, and the silence when payroll stopped tomorrow, that would be mine. No flashy icon, no dramatic name, just a string of letters and numbers, meaningless to anyone without the map. I'd named it that way on purpose. Payroll master key encryption protocols are like safes, inside safes. You never label the final combination unless you want to make a hacker's day. I opened it in the secure console. 2 green bars flickered on the screen, the kind you only see deep inside a system most people will never touch. My hands moved without hesitation, 14 years of muscle memory guiding each step. Select, confirm, authenticate. There's no fanfare when you delete something like this. Just a confirmation prompt and the quiet blink of a cursor after it's gone. That's what most people don't understand. Real damage is quiet. I took my time with the audit log, typing it like an invoice. Deleted payroll master encryption file per manager instruction. No adjectives, no commentary. Just a clean, clinical line that would sit in the system forever, waiting to be read aloud in a room full of executives, leaving no doubt whose fingerprints were on the trigger. I double-checked, not because I doubted myself, but for the reassurance. The directory was empty. The heartbeat was gone. Without this file, payroll was a locked vault with no key, no money in, no money out for 1,500 employees. For a moment, I leaned back, scanning the Boston office. Keyboards clicked. The printer hummed. The old HVAC rattled. It all felt strangely distant, like I was watching through glass. People sipped coffee, traded Slack messages, laughed in the break room, blissfully unaware a fuse had just been lit under the company's financial machinery. The satisfaction wasn't gloating. It was stillness, the same quiet you feel after tightening the final bolt on a machine you know will run exactly as you designed. I'd followed Harold's order to the letter, documented it, and left one trace, the audit entry pointing directly back to him. Locking my terminal, I stood. Out of habit, I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the audit log, not because I needed it for protection, but because I liked the symmetry of keeping my own private copy. A coworker passed my desk and asked if I was heading to lunch early. I smiled. Not yet. Harold was still somewhere between his office and the break room, thinking he'd just put a stubborn employee in her place. In reality, he'd just asked me to cut the brake lines on his own career, and I'd done it with surgical precision. I sat back down, opened my email, and drafted an innocuous note to my personal account. Audit log attached. Sent. Archived. The vault was locked, the key gone, and the man who ordered it had no idea the walls were closing in. Harold strolled from his office like a man celebrating a win, not someone who just lit his career on fire. His voice carried across the floor, boasting to another manager about cleaning up clutter and getting everyone on the same page. The other guy laughed politely, the kind of laugh you give when you're trapped in a conversation you didn't ask for. I didn't need to see them to picture Harold leaning in, using big hand gestures to milk his own story. I turned back to my screen, opened the secure console, and exported the audit log, barely a kilobyte in size. Just a few lines of cold truth, deleted payroll master encryption file per manager instruction. Whether you were a junior IT tech or the CFO, there was no mistaking those words. I attached the file to another email addressed to myself. Subject line: for records. No explanation, just a time-stamped piece of evidence worth its weight in gold before the day ended. Click send, gone from company servers, tucked somewhere only I could reach. Then I shut the laptop completely. No glowing screen, no fan hum. Silence. I sat for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. It was like the heavy stillness before a thunderstorm when the horizon darkens, but no one else notices. From my desk, I caught snippets of Harold's voice about modernizing the department. He didn't know the system was now a beautiful, useless ornament ticking on the outside, dead within. Almost poetic. The man who thought he was cleaning house had just boarded up all the exits. The office buzzed with phones ringing, printers chattering, and the occasional burst of laughter. Everything looked normal, which made the truth feel sharper. This wasn't just revenge. It wasn't even about the years of slights and stolen credit, though there were plenty. This was about watching a man dig his own grave with a smile, unaware the shovel had my fingerprints all over it. I leaned back, hands folded in my lap. No rush. The clock was on my side. In a few hours, the system would stall, and the first people to notice would be the ones with the most to lose. My part was done. His part was only starting. Down the hall, the break room door swung shut, followed by the hiss of the coffee machine. I pictured Harold adding extra sugar, savoring what he thought was a win. I almost wished I could see his face later when he realized the cost. Almost. I heard him before I saw him, post-coffee arrogance in full swing. His laugh cut short mid-sentence as he turned the corner toward his desk. His footsteps faltered like he'd spotted a rattlesnake waiting for him. The head of HR stood there, arms crossed into a line sharp enough to cut glass. Beside her was the CFO, a tall man whose usual calm carried authority. Today, his face was copper-red, jaw clenched tight. Morning," Harold said, though it was well past noon. He forced a smile. Neither returned it. The CFO just stared, unblinking, weighing whether to start here or behind closed doors. From my desk, I had the perfect side view. I didn't turn my head, didn't lean in, just let it unfold like background noise while my eyes stayed on my blank laptop screen. But inside, I could feel the shift, the way power moves, without a word. Harold wasn't steering anymore. He'd walked into a meeting he didn't know he was in. "Can we speak in your office?" HR asked, not a question. She headed for the glass-walled corner space he loved to brag about. The CFO followed, hands in pockets, shoulders stiff. Harold trailed behind like a schoolboy summoned to the principal. The first domino had fallen harder than I'd hoped. By now, they'd have found the audit log. By now, the absence of the payroll key would be obvious. The CFO's ashen look told me something more. He wasn't just irritated. He was worried. Payroll wasn't a distant problem. It was tomorrow. A few co-workers glanced up as Harold, the CFO, and HR passed, then quickly looked back at their screens. The office still hummed, but the air felt thinner, sharper, like the moment before a glass tips off a table. Through the shifted blinds, I caught glimpses of the meeting. The CFO did most of the talking. HR stood off to the side, arms crossed. Harold's hands were up in that defensive half-shrug, trying to spin it as a misunderstanding or some cleanup initiative. But with a missing payroll master key, there's no good spin. Either you don't know what it is making you incompetent, or you do, and deleted it anyway, making you dangerous. Both end careers. I leaned back, stretching my shoulders. It wasn't gloating. It was alignment, watching reality rearrange, so truth was the only thing left standing. The CFO gestured toward the door. They emerged moments later. Harold's smirk was gone, his eyes darting for an ally. When they met mine, I gave him nothing, just the same neutral mask I'd worn when he gave me the order. He walked past in silence, but it carried more weight than words. Somewhere inside, he had to feel it, the creeping realization that something was very wrong. They didn't make it back to his office before the first crack appeared. The CFO stopped, turned fully toward him, and asked in a flat, almost casual tone, "Where is the payroll key file?" Harold blinked like he'd been asked where he left his sunglasses. His brows knit together. "What payroll key file?" he asked, voice pitched in that fake confusion people use when they're stalling. The CFO didn't blink. "The encryption key that unlocks payroll processing." Harold shifted his weight, the defensive smirk creeping back. "Oh, that thing obsolete. I told Ite to clean it up this morning. It's just old clutter." The CFO cut him off with a small shake of his head, as if brushing the words aside. "Let me be very clear," the CFO said, his voice low but carrying. "Without that file, we cannot process payroll for anyone. Not tomorrow, not next week, until it's rebuilt. And rebuilding isn't a matter of clicking restore. It takes weeks, and compliance has to sign off." From the corner of my eye, I saw Harold's posture shift, shoulders dropping just slightly as the first crack in his confidence appeared. Still, he tried to push back. "Well, surely there's a backup somewhere," he said, spreading his hands. "There isn't," the CFO replied. His tone stayed calm, but the words had weight. "For security reasons, the master key isn't on the cloud mirrored to external drives or replicated off the secure local system. That's the law, and you'd know it if you'd ever read the compliance protocols." The air in the Boston office felt heavier now. Conversations at nearby desks slowed, voices dropping. Harold glanced around, probably realizing this wasn't staying behind closed doors. I kept my face neutral, scrolling through my inbox like nothing was happening. Inside, I savored every pause, every shift in tone, like a slow sip of top-shelf whiskey. The CFO stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough for me to catch. "We have 1,500 employees expecting paychecks tomorrow. Direct deposits, paper checks, contractors, everyone depends on that key. So let's try again." "Where is it I told you?" Harold said, his voice sharpening. "I had it deleted. It was part of the cleanup initiative." And there it was, no hedging, no euphemisms. Just the admission, exactly as it would appear in the HR report, meeting notes, and inevitable email chain. The CFO's face stayed unreadable. "Then you've just created a company-wide payroll crisis," he said, each word striking like a hammer. From there, the conversation moved toward the growing cluster of HR, IT, and finance staff. I stayed still, watching from the corner of my eye as the ripples spread. This was no longer a hypothetical problem. It had a time, a place, and an audience. And Harold Benton had just made himself the starring act. Within seconds, two IT leads were at his desk opening terminals and scanning every directory they could find. It was like watching firefighters kick down doors in a building you already know has burned to the ground. The first IT tech tried standard backups, local mirrors, scheduled snapshots, nothing. The second checked the compliance vault, but the access log showed what I already knew. The master payroll key had never been stored there. By law, it couldn't be. Federal and state payroll regulations allowed only one active single-instance key existing in one place. Lose it, and you start from scratch. That was the point. Try the off-site archive, Harold said too quickly, like guessing the right door before the walls closed in. There's no off-site archive for the key one, Tech replied without looking up. His voice was steady, but the edge was there. That'd be a compliance violation. You'd know that if you'd read the system specs. I sat at my desk, hands folded outwardly, calm. Inside, I felt every failed attempt like a slow twist of the screw. Each no, each directory's empty tightened the pressure on Harold's already cracking composure. The HR director pulled up a chair, jotting neat, deliberate notes like she could be drafting his resignation letter mid-meeting. The CFO stood with arms crossed, eyes locked on Harold as though watching a confession take shape. Check the dev server. Harold snapped, his veneer peeling. Even if it was there, it wouldn't work. Another tech said, meeting his gaze. The encryption protocol's tied to the active key's unique signature. You can't copy and paste it. It's not a password, it's a cryptographic handshake with the payroll processor. I let my eyes drop to my keyboard to hide the faint curl of a smile. Here was the part no one had said yet, the part I'd been waiting for. My employment contract, the one Harold had never bothered to read, stated the encryption protocol could only be regenerated with my written consent. It was a safeguard the company added years ago after a near disaster. The clause was buried deep, dry, and ironclad. Even if they wanted to rebuild today, tomorrow, or next week, they'd need me in writing, and I wasn't giving it for free. The IT team kept trying old repositories, temp folders, dusty drives from storage. Each came back the same: empty, incompatible, or useless. The urgency in the room was turning grim. Even those who didn't fully grasp the technical side could read the body language. Harold hovered behind the IT team, peering at screens and muttering suggestions, but no one was listening anymore. The attention had shifted to the CFO and HR, and to the realization that this wasn't a minor hiccup. It was a financial and legal time bomb set to go off in less than 24 hours. I stayed still, letting the tension wind tighter. The noose was already in place. All it needed was a public pull. The low murmur broke when the CFO's phone buzzed. He answered, spoke a few clipped words, then looked straight at Harold. The CEO's on his way. The temperature in the Boston office seemed to drop. Chairs straightened. The IT lead stopped typing. Even HR's pen froze over her notepad. Harold tried to appear calm, but his Adam's apple betrayed him. The CEO walked in without greetings, his presence like a man stepping into a fire he'd been warned about too late. "Someone tell me," he said, voice low but sharp, "why I just heard tomorrow's payroll is in jeopardy." His gaze locked on the CFO, then shifted to Harold. "Start talking." Harold launched into his usual tactic talk, fast, flood the air with half-truths. There was a legacy file clutter really that I told IT to clear out this morning. It turns out it might have been tied to some older functions. Older system functions, the CFO cut in louder now. It was the encryption key for payroll. Without it, nothing moves. The CEO's eyes sharpened. "Is that true?" Harold hesitated just long enough for silence to become an answer. "Technically, yes, but there must be a backup." "There isn't," the CFO snapped, cutting him off. "For compliance reasons. We've been through this." Without looking at Harold, the CFO turned to the IT lead. "Show him." The projector screen came to life. A few keystrokes and the audit log filled the wall clean, time-stamped entries scrolling until one line was highlighted: deleted payroll master encryption file per manager instruction. The room went still. The CEO read it once, then again. Per manager instruction, he repeated, eyes locked on Harold. You gave that order. Harold's mouth opened again. It was misrepresented to me, Harold said at last, his voice edging toward a plea. I wasn't told it was still critical. That's not how this works, the CFO replied, his tone dropping to a colder register. You don't erase the foundation of a system you don't understand and then act surprised when the building collapses. From my seat, I kept my gaze on the screen, expression, neutral, heartbeat steady. I'd been waiting for this the moment the trap shut in full view of an audience that mattered. This wasn't an HR sidebar anymore. This was the CEO, CFO, IT, and HR all staring at a line of text that could end a career before lunch. Harold tried one more pivot. Maybe the file was mislabeled, "Don't insult us." The CEO cut in, leaning over the table, closing the distance. Your name's on the order. Your voice is on the meeting log. And your decision is about to cost this company 1,500 paychecks plus whatever legal fallout comes with it. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Harold's shoulders slumped the first crack in his defiance. With the evidence hanging on the wall like a framed confession, I knew there was no recovery. The CFO didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He turned toward Harold with the precision of someone placing a blade on a chopping block. You ordered the deletion of the one irreplaceable file we need for tomorrow's payroll. Why? The question landed heavy. Every eye in the room fixed on Harold. The CEO's face stayed unreadable. HR's pen hovered. The IT lead sat frozen. Even the HVAC seemed to pause. Harold's mouth closed, then opened again. No words. The bravado, the smirk, the polished spin were gone. His face drained pale under the fluorescent lights. Why, the CFO asked again, softer this time. I thought it was obsolete, Harold stammered. No one has to tell you not to pull the foundation out from under a system you're responsible for, the CEO snapped. That's your job to know. HR set her notepad aside, folded her hands, and finally spoke. Given the immediate operational impact and the nature of your decision, we'll need to discuss your role here privately. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. The CFO leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching Harold as if the man might combust. We're now facing a company-wide payroll freeze because of a decision you made without understanding its consequences. That's not a leadership issue. That's a liability issue. The CEO didn't need to add anything. He simply gave a small nod to Claire from HR. She stood. Let's step into the other room, she said, voice flat. Harold glanced around the table like a man searching for a lifeline and finding none. Shoulders rounded, he finally stood and followed her toward the door. 2 security staff waited outside, not dramatic, no raised voices. Just one on each side, walking him out of the conference area. Quieter that way, but no one missed the meaning. The door shut behind them, and for a moment the room was still. Then the CEO turned to me for the first time. You know how to fix this, he said. Not a question. A statement. I met his eyes, my voice steady. On my terms. He didn't blink, just nodded, the look of a man who understood the price of salvaging an unwinnable game. Around the table, people glanced between us, sensing the balance had shifted, but no one spoke. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of it settle. The man who thought he could strip my work from me was gone, escorted out without his badge. And I was still here, the only one who could open the vault, the only one who could get 1,500 people paid. Justice, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply closes the door behind you and leaves you in the chair where decisions are made. I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my shoes? Drop a comment and let me know if you think I made the right call or if you'd have handled Harold differently. Your support keeps stories like this alive, and I read every single reply. If there's one thing I've learned in my 59 years, it's this: protect the value you bring because not everyone will appreciate it until it's gone. Stand your ground, document everything, and never hand over your leverage for free. And while you're here, Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next battle.